My mother, she isn't quite herself today.
Norman Bates' mother has been dead and buried in Green Lawn Cemetery for the past 10 years.
I declare, don't you touch me. Don't put me down.
I don't like you going to that house alone.
I can handle a sick old woman.
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Once I had written the first draft, which incidentally is the one that he shot. He told me that Anthony Perkins was available to play Norman Bates. I had told him that was sensational, and that was what was going to happen. He mentioned Janet Leigh for the star part because he felt, among other things, that no one would be able to accept that we had killed her this early in the movie.
The first thing that happened was that I received the novel by Robert Bloch from Mr. Hitchcock. He sent me this small novel with a note that said, please consider the role of Mary. It was Mary in the novel. And of course there will be changes, and so you know Anthony Perkins is going to play Norman Bates. And he said, you know, the script has not been written, but so you know what the essence of the story is. Well, when I received this, I didn't even have to read it, but I did, only because the opportunity of working with Mr. Hitchcock was enough for me. But I dutifully read it, as I was supposed to, and I finished it. I was very intrigued. I mean, it was so different. It was such a departure, and such an unusual approach to a movie. And so, of course, I just said yes. I have been asked subsequently, well, didn't it ever bother you that the role of Marion in the script was ended so abruptly? And it never did. It never occurred to me that would be a problem. I mean, you know, that didn't even enter my head. The whole thing that I concentrated on was, one, working with Mr. Hitchcock, and two, the anticipation of what was he going to do with this. I couldn't wait to see how he would solve this and weave his magic spell and get this project to the public. As it was getting closer, Mr. Hitchcock called and asked, you know, if we could have a meeting. Of course, for several reasons. One, he wanted to, you know, to sort of have a discussion about his modus operandi. I mean, how he worked on the set and how he used his camera. Explained to me how his camera was absolute, and that as a director, he had confidence that I would bring to Marion what it needed. If I had any problems, by all means, he would be there to help me if I, you know, should need it. He said the only sort of control is that my camera has to be the focal point. In other words, when my camera moves, you have to move. And he said, if you have a problem with that, I can help you, you know, with the motivation to move on that point. And I know that many of the performers who have worked with Mr. Hitchcock feel that they were perhaps hindered or cramped in style, say, because they were asked to move at a certain definite point. I took it more as a challenge. I mean, in other words, I thought, well, that's my job, is it? So I can find my own motivation, thank you very much. I mean, it was really a challenge to me as an actress to rethink and find my own motivation to move at the time he wanted me to move. That's how I took it. And I must say, I think that's how he offered it. I don't think he offered it as a way to stumble or block you. I think he offered it as a challenge. You do your job, I do mine. And he would expect someone to adapt to it and to find their own reason to move. And if not, he was there as the director to help you. So I never understood that sort of antithesis that happened with some people, but I can understand it, but it just doesn't seem warranted to me. The other reason for the meeting was he had hoped to fit me with contact lenses for the last shot when the camera's on the eye and pulls back into the wide shot, thinking that the contact lenses would give the look of nothing, deadness, as opposed to what I could do. And we went, and unfortunately, at that time, that long ago, the contact lenses weren't as sophisticated as they are today, and it would have taken 6 weeks for me to be able to get used to wearing the contact lenses, and so we couldn't use them. And so he said, well, you're gonna have to go it alone, old girl.
He loathed location. He didn't want to go on any location unless he had to. Because he said it costs you a lot of money, it costs you twice what it's going to cost you on the set. You then have to come back and redub everything because of all the noise that goes on, So he really didn't like it,
Hey!
She is not a thief. She's a very bad thief. I mean, she is clumsy. She obviously can't disguise what she's feeling. I mean, she's so obvious because she's not practiced. So this is not her nature. But it's a grasp. It's a desperate grasp at life. The only satisfaction almost was that on the ride, she just imagined what they were saying back home.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Girl works for you for 10 years. You trust her.
All of that dialogue that she imagines, Mr. Hitchcock knew exactly the timing. I mean, he knew what lines he was going to use voiceover. So he did them. He said to me the lines that I was imagining hearing. And so as he was saying it, I could imagine just what was being said, which was kind of fun, thinking, oh, well, that creepy guy who had the money anyway deserves not to have it.
Hot creeper. She sat there while I dumped it out. Hardly even looked at it. Planning. And even flirting with me.
That's the really only sort of pleasurable moment she had, really, until she meets someone who is more mixed up and more confused than she. And she was able to realize she can't go that route either.
The design of the motel and the famous Psycho house, it was supposed to be located somewhere in Central California. There was never a town specifically named. We always felt that it was up around Tulare, somewhere up in that area. The basic thing that we had to have with the house and the motel, the house had to stand above the motel. There had to be the steps down to the motel. There had to be an angle from the motel that you could see from the window up to the house. These were all designed prior and then laid out after the script, of course. I remember one night we were on the back lot and it was early in the production, and I had, as an assistant director, really done my homework because this was my first feature with Mr. Hitchcock. I didn't want it to be my last, and I thought I was really prepared. And it was the shot where Janet Leigh drives up to the motel at night. It's pouring rain, and Norman comes down the stairs, and everything was ready to go. The rain, I'd rehearsed the rain and everything. We're all set to roll the cameras, and we turn on the rain, and Mr. Hitchcock said, cut. And he said, Hilton, you didn't prepare this very well. And I was shocked. What's wrong? And he pointed up there, and sure enough, what was coming up over the behind on the back lot at Universal? But a full moon. Here we are in a big rainstorm and the moon in the background. I had done everything but had looked at the charts and found out when the full moon was. So what we did hurriedly, and to this day I'll never forget the wonderful grip crew we had. We had 2 grips with a sentry stand and a long pole and some blacks, and they followed that moon all night and blocked it out from the camera.
Dirty night.
You have a vacancy.
Oh, we have 12 vacancies. 12 cabins, 12 vacancies.
Tony Perkins, well, he's just a master. It was a joy to come to work, and there was always an excitement for me because it was like you knew what you wanted to bring to the scene. But the excitement was you didn't know what he was going to bring. And obviously what he brought then sparked more from you in response. And so it was just a wonderful experience to the anticipation of what was going to happen. What more were we going to get today than we thought was there? He had a wonderful sense of humor. Wonderful sense of humor. Very dry, you know. He was a good friend. He was a wonderful husband, dear and loving father. I mean, he was not Norman Bates, but he was just so brilliant that the people said, yes, you are. You are too, Norman Bates.
The shower sequence of Psycho was shot on a set that was no more than 12 by 12, 12 feet by 12 feet. It was a very small, confined set.
The shower sequence took up 1/3 of my shooting time, actually. I mean, I think I worked 3 weeks on the movie, and the shower sequence took 7 days, 7 shooting days. So that was a good hunk of of my work.
For the assistant director, who was kind of in charge of the schedule and the time and the hours, etc., the number of shots we had to do in there, and they weren't difficult for Mr. Hitchcock to direct and to take time. Once we rolled the cameras, it was a matter of seconds of getting the shot. It was up to Jack Russell, the cinematographer, to light each setup and to move the camera around from shooting straight down to straight up to cross angles to into the water. I mean, it was tedious for him and the time that it took to light. And then, of course, we had to have the warm water because we kept running out of that. We had tanks and had to heat them and keep them heated. There were many things we had to do that were behind the scenes. The actual shooting was easy. The water coming out of the shower head was a special rig. It was made up in the special effects department. It was shot straight at the lens, and the camera was tilted at such an angle that the water never touched the lens. It was, today they've got ways of wiping the water and cleaning it that you don't know. But this was a special shower head. We were one of the first to ever work with a nude photo double, and that was all a secret and a hush-hush thing, and there were signs on the door, and we never allowed a visitor or anything in.
Hitchcock wanted a nude model because he felt that a person who was naked professionally would be easier to deal with than an actress who had no experience being naked in front of hundreds of people. And he brought in a nude model, very nice young lady. It was quite charming to see the two of them standing there talking. Hitchcock here and the naked girl there.
There was a nude model, absolutely, because for several reasons. One, he had to see what density of water and the shower curtain so that you couldn't see whether someone was nude or not. And you can't tell that unless you see someone nude, to know when to cut it off. You know, where you don't see it, where you think what you see, but you don't see it.
Mr. Hitchcock felt that through the shower curtain, the effect of a nude, if they had a stocking or whatever on, that it wouldn't be the same.
Also, there was a scene where he drags the body, wraps the body in the curtain, and then takes it to the car. And I did not do that. But the scene itself was so brilliantly conceived because Mr. Hitchcock brought us to this point where from then on it became what we thought we saw, not what we saw. And he did that with his camera, with the editing, so that the audience finally just in this frenzy of chung, 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 each cut was like a stab of the knife. And eventually the audience said, in their mind, this was a knife, that was a knife, and it was a cut. And the cut is even indicative, the word cut, because to them, each cut was a cut. The sound that they used for the stabbing, he had the prop man bring different melons, and you know, he would stab the melons, and Mr. Hitchcock wasn't looking, but he knew what each one was, and he said the kasabi.
The blood on Psycho, that was an area where we did a lot of tests ahead of time. Jack Barron and Bob Dawn, the makeup people, to get the precise, well, I guess, density of the blood. Of course, we were in black and white, so the color didn't make that big a deal, but the density was a problem.
He tested several things. There was movie blood, what they, you know, used for movie blood in black and white. Then there was, I think he tested ketchup, and then he tested chocolate syrup, and he felt that the chocolate syrup read the best. I feel very strongly that the reason that Psycho has endured is because of the restrictions that were put on us, and because Mr. Hitchcock had to come up with a suspense story without showing what, you know, today is normal. He allowed the audience to create what they thought they saw. And when the audience becomes a part of the creative process, they're not going to forget that.
Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.